The text arrived at 2 a.m. sharp. The blue light of the phone screen cut through the dark. Ricardo wasn't asleep. He was in their high-rise condo overlooking the twinkling expanse of Miami, deep into server logs for a late-night work emergency. He was a successful 33-year-old financial analyst, accustomed to crisis management. He was not expecting a crisis from within his own walls. The message from his wife, Isabel, 31, was brutally succinct. "You don't need to know who I'm with. We're on a break. Don't call me. I will reach out when I feel like it." Ricardo stared at the words. Not trembling, not confused, not instantly heartbroken. Just still. A sudden, terrifying clarity washed over him. This wasn't a plea for space. It was a declaration of war disguised as freedom. For months, Isabel had whispered about excitement and feeling alive, complaints he'd dismissed as marital fatigue. Now he realized she wasn't just talking about it. She was actively outsourcing that need. He thought of the 3 years of marriage, the shared dreams, the home they had built, all of it condensed into a single, cold digital sentence. But instead of the expected emotional spiral, a pragmatic switch flipped inside him. At 2:16 a.m., just 16 minutes later, Isabel committed her final, defining error. She blocked his number. That act of confident dismissal sealed her fate. She assumed his love was a guarantee, a safety net she could always deploy. She assumed he would fight, plead, and chase. She was wrong. Ricardo's immediate response wasn't to call a friend or reread the hurtful message. It was to access his own documentation. Quietly, he retrieved the prenuptial agreement from the secure fire safe they kept tucked away. When they had signed it years ago, Isabel had scoffed, calling it just silly paperwork. Ricardo scanned the relevant clause, the words echoing in the silence of the large apartment. Any documented instance of infidelity shall result in the immediate and permanent forfeiture of all marital assets, spousal support, or claims to joint property by the offending party. He signed because he trusted her. She signed because she never expected the contract to matter. At 3 a.m., Ricardo abandoned the server logs and opened a new browser window. His search was clinical. Licensed private investigator Miami ironclad documentation. He needed proof, legally sound and emotionally detached. He clicked on Stonebridge Investigations, a name known for discreet efficiency. He didn't ask for therapy. He asked for an investigation. His email was precise. "My wife departed at 2 a.m. stating she is on a break with another party. I require full, immediate surveillance. I need legally admissible proof of infidelity, including timestamps, locations, and third-party contact information. Start now." The betrayal had not broken him. It had focused him. He wasn't acting from anger. He was acting from strategic self-preservation. If Isabel wanted a break, he would ensure it was permanent. He knew the moment the message arrived, the marriage wasn't salvageable. It was already over. His only task now was to execute the clean, legal separation she had unknowingly authorized. A memory flashed. Months ago, Isabel was staring out at the city lights, whispering into her phone, claiming it was her cousin. When he tried to hug her, she'd pulled away, commenting, "Ricardo, you're so predictable. I need someone who makes me feel alive." He had foolishly thought she meant a vacation. He realized now she meant an exit. By 4:15 a.m., Ricardo received a reply from the detective, Ramon Stone. "Mr. Harper, I have received your request. I will begin tracking the subject's movements immediately. Evidence will be digital and physical, delivered daily." Ricardo typed a single word in response: execute. He closed his laptop, walked to the balcony, and watched the first pale streaks of dawn appear over the Atlantic. He hadn't fought for answers, hadn't pleaded for forgiveness. He had simply and completely moved to secure the one thing Isabel had gambled away: consequence. The break she sought was about to become the most expensive mistake of her life. The sunrise over the Miami skyline on day one felt different to Ricardo. It wasn't a dawn of grief, but of absolute, chilling clarity. The emotional storm Isabel expected had never materialized. Instead, a methodical calm had settled over him. He was no longer a husband. He was a strategic partner executing a clean exit. He didn't check if Isabel had unblocked him. He didn't try her number. His focus shifted entirely inward, systematically dismantling the life they had shared, starting with his habits. For 3 years, Isabel's insistence on excitement had slowly eroded Ricardo's interests. She found his long-distance cycling routes boring and his love for deep-sea diving in the Keys too isolating. He had allowed his world to shrink to accommodate her manufactured need for constant social engagement. Now, the space she created was his to reclaim. By 8 a.m., Ricardo was in the gym, something he had neglected since the wedding. He wasn't working out to burn off stress. He was building a new foundation. He felt the tension leave his shoulders, replaced by physical strength. Later that day, he reinstalled his old dive tracker app. He immediately started planning a solo trip to Key West for the following weekend. His world was expanding, not collapsing. The evidence from the private investigator, Ramon Stone, arrived daily via secure, encrypted messages. Isabel, confident in her break, was making Ramon's job remarkably easy. She wasn't being discreet. The photos showed her laughing, often in the same clothes as the day before, linking arms with her companion, a man named Julio, as they entered and exited high-end hotels near South Beach. Time-stamped receipts for room service and joint credit card charges followed. Ricardo reviewed the files with the cool detachment of an analyst examining quarterly reports. Each piece of evidence, each smile, each casual touch did not wound him. It simply reinforced the righteousness of his action and solidified his legal position. The pain he might have felt months ago was now just documentation for the divorce file. Meanwhile, Isabel was fully immersed in her self-proclaimed freedom. She thought she was hurting Ricardo and seizing control. In reality, she was meticulously building a case against herself, furnishing his lawyer with all the necessary ammunition required by the prenuptial agreement. 7 days into the break, Ricardo had reconnected with his oldest friend, Miguel, a man Isabel had dismissed as too serious. Over a quiet dinner, Ricardo didn't rant or weep. He simply stated the facts. She left. I hired a private investigator. I am getting divorced. Miguel, seeing the clarity in his friend's eyes, offered support, not pity. By the beginning of the second week, Ricardo was sleeping soundly, something he hadn't done since the subtle emotional manipulation from Isabel began months earlier. His work performance surged, earning him immediate consideration for a long-anticipated promotion. Sudden plot twist, the thrill dies. On day 13, while Ricardo was finalizing the purchase of new scuba gear, the glamour of Isabel's break began to unravel. The excitement of Julio, the man she'd run off with, had a short shelf life. Julio was chaos, not stability. He was thrilling, but utterly self-centered. Isabel realized he flaunted texts from other women, wasn't interested in her feelings, and quickly tired of her increasingly possessive behavior. After a pointless argument over a trivial matter, a text message from a woman Julio didn't even bother to hide. Julio delivered the cold, hard truth. Look, Isabel, I'm done with the drama. Maybe you should go home for a while. You're getting too intense for me. Isabel froze. Julio's tone wasn't teasing or affectionate. It was the detached dismissal reserved for an inconvenience. The thrill she had chased for 2 weeks vanished instantly, replaced by a sudden, sickening panic. Julio wasn't a long-term plan. Ricardo was. The realization hit her. She had been disposable to Julio, but she assumed she was indispensable to her husband. Her internal narrative immediately pivoted. Time to go home. Time to apologize. Ricardo would be upset, yes, but he always forgave her emotional outbursts. He always crumbled under her charm. She packed her bag, forcing a tight, confident smile she didn't feel. She didn't know that she wasn't simply going home. She was walking directly into a perfectly constructed, completely silent legal trap. The game was over, and the consequences of her permanent choice were waiting for her at the front door. Day 15. The break was over. Isabel needed to reset her life, and she knew exactly where to do it. Back home. She walked up to the entrance of the high-security condo building in Miami, rehearsing her apology. It was stress, Ricardo. I just needed space. I missed you. She had perfected the blend of vulnerability and subtle manipulation that always worked on him. She expected silent treatment, maybe a brief argument, followed by forgiveness. She expected to resume control. At 6:42 p.m., she held her key fob to the magnetic reader. A sharp, loud beep. The light flashed angry red. Isabel frowned. She tried again. Red. She felt a knot tighten in her stomach. This was an inconvenience, not a catastrophe. Maybe the building management had deactivated it from maintenance. She moved to the main apartment door and confidently keyed in her personalized digital code. The electronic lock mechanism whirred, then emitted a definitive, unforgiving access denied signal. Panic, cold and sharp, replaced her planned confidence. She tried the code again, slowly, ensuring accuracy. Still denied. Ricardo isn't petty, she told herself. He wouldn't lock me out. She hammered on the heavy oak door. Then louder. Nothing. No footsteps, no voice, just the sterile hum of the hallway light and the silent, locked air conditioning unit inside. Finally, the door across the hall, belonging to the reserved Mrs. Cortez, cracked open. "Oh, Isabel, you're back, Mrs. Cortez said, her voice cautious, tinged with a strange mix of pity and disapproval. "Mrs. Cortez, do you know where Ricardo is?" "My card isn't working," Isabel asked, her voice tight, trying to sound casual. Mrs. Cortez hesitated, then spoke carefully. "He hasn't been around much. Been packing, traveling. He looked good, though. Happier." The word, happier, hit Isabel like a physical slap. She forced a strained smile and retreated, her heart hammering against her ribs. This couldn't be a dramatic gesture. This was calculated. She pulled out her phone and called Ricardo. The call rang once, twice, then went straight to the generic voicemail recording. "The number you are trying to reach is unavailable." He hadn't just blocked her. He had effectively deactivated the line she knew. Frantically, she typed a text message. "Ricardo, what is going on? My card isn't working. I'm outside." She waited. 1 minute. 5. 10. No reply. The silence was deafening. It was a weapon she had never anticipated. 30 minutes later, standing alone in the sterile hallway, her phone buzzed with an incoming email. The sender's address was unfamiliar, professional, and chillingly formal. The signature at the bottom stopped her breath. Harper and Rowe Legal Group. Isabel's hands shook as she opened the message. There was no greeting, no personal note, just 3 concise paragraphs of legal fact. Subject: marital asset forfeiture notice. Mrs. Harper, as outlined in the prenuptial agreement, Clause 4, Section B, you have forfeited all claims to marital assets, spousal support, and compensation due to documented and irrefutable evidence of infidelity. Your belongings, including personal effects, clothing, and stored items, have been professionally packed and placed in Storage Unit 117. Your access to the apartment has been permanently revoked. All communication regarding the dissolution of the marriage must proceed solely through our legal channels. Further attempts to contact Mr. Harper directly or to violate boundary parameters will be formally reported. A clean, surgical cut. No shouting. No emotion. No second chances. The marriage was not ending with a fight. It was ending with a statement of fact and an invoice. Isabel slid down the hallway wall, dropping her purse. A sound escaped her, a strangled, swallowed sob of genuine fear. For the first time, she realized the devastating error of her assumption. She hadn't just taken a break. She had signed her own termination papers. Her carefully constructed illusion of control had dissolved into the cold professionalism of a law firm's email. She was alone, locked out, and legally stripped of everything. Her break was officially, irrevocably, permanent. The shock of the locked door and the lawyer's email gave way to raw, frantic desperation. Isabel didn't sleep that night. She was adrift in Miami, bouncing between temporary, expensive hotel rooms, her mind racing through every possible tactic to regain control of the narrative and the assets. Her first move was to attempt to rally public opinion, starting with their shared social circle. She called their closest mutual friends. Every call was met with the same cold, polite neutrality. "Isabel, this sounds complicated. We are not getting involved. You need to talk to Ricardo's lawyer." She was met not with sympathy, but with aversion. She even tried showing up at Ricardo's office, hoping a public scene would shame him into communication, perhaps reminding him of her humanity, enough to soften his resolve. But Ricardo wasn't there. He had anticipated this move and was strategically working from home, dedicating the early morning hours to a rigorous cardio workout and a final review of the evidence. Her panic intensified when she reached out to Julio, the man who had been the catalyst for this crisis. She needed an ally, someone to validate her temporary insanity. Her text to Julio read, "Ricardo is being ridiculous. He'll talk. He has to." Julio's reply arrived instantly, brutally detached. "He's done. Don't drag me into this. You made your choice." Isabel's world, meticulously curated over 3 years of financial comfort and 2 weeks of shallow thrills, was collapsing. Meanwhile, Ricardo was in the apartment he had completely reclaimed as his own sanctuary. He didn't feel vindictive. He felt clarity. The fog of doubt and emotional exhaustion that had shadowed him for months had lifted. He opened the binder from Ramon Stone one last time. He reviewed the time-stamped photos, the credit card transactions, the geolocation screenshots, and the hotel receipts. It was all there, a flawless legal ledger documenting her betrayal. His lawyer called, "Mr. Harper, everything is in perfect order. The prenup is airtight, and the documentation is overwhelming. No judge will entertain a challenge based on these facts." Ricardo nodded, sipping his coffee. He didn't need to argue, beg, or gloat. Isabel had already sealed her fate with her reckless confidence. By the third day after her return, Isabel's attempts to break the silence escalated into uncontrolled boundary violations. She returned to the condo building, demanding entrance, shouting his name. Security cameras recorded her every move, providing further documentation of harassment for Ricardo's legal team. That evening, she called his phone one last time. It rang once, then went straight to an impersonal corporate voicemail. Not the unavailable message from before, but a clean, professional rejection. The final hammer blow arrived via email, the text brief, formal, and devastating in its precision. "Mrs. Harper, as stated in your prenuptial agreement, documented infidelity nullifies all claims to marital property. Communication with your husband is to be handled exclusively through legal channels. Storage Unit 117 contains your belongings. Further violation of boundaries will be immediately reported to law enforcement as harassment." Isabel froze. Her plan to manipulate, charm, or guilt Ricardo now felt utterly pointless. In that moment, a crucial shift occurred. She finally realized that Ricardo's silence was more powerful than any argument. His calm, strategic control was a weapon she had underestimated. Fear, genuine and paralyzing, replaced her initial excitement. The strategy of reclaiming self. While Isabel spiraled in panic, Ricardo was focused entirely on personal reconstruction. He started journaling again, a habit he had abandoned during the years of marital tension. He accepted the promotion he had been too distracted to pursue. Crucially, he reconnected with his local diving group, arranging a charter to the Gulf Stream. These small, deliberate acts were not revenge. They were steps toward a new, self-respecting freedom. Legally, his strategy remained meticulous. The evidence was filed. The motion for an immediate, non-contested divorce was submitted. Ricardo wasn't fighting against Isabel. He was fighting for the integrity of the contract they both signed. He had allowed her to document her own downfall, ensuring the consequences would be swift, legal, and absolute. As the court date approached, Isabel was frantic, pacing her hotel room, searching for a single loophole. Ricardo, in contrast, felt an immense sense of peace. He was ready to witness justice unfold, not as a spectacle of anger, but as a clean, final act of legal closure. The confrontation was imminent. The final question remained. Could Isabel, stripped of all her tools of manipulation, find one last desperate tactic to overturn the inevitable legal verdict? The morning of the divorce hearing arrived. Isabel entered the Miami courtroom dressed impeccably, her composure a brittle facade over her internal panic. She was relying on one last gamble, the power of performance. She planned to cry, to plead regret, and to insinuate Ricardo's coldness had driven her to desperation. She hoped to sway the judge with manufactured sincerity. Ricardo arrived moments later, wearing a tailored suit, his posture straight, his expression neutral. He was accompanied by his legal team and Ramon Stone, the private investigator, whose presence was a silent declaration of war. There was no visible anger in Ricardo, only stillness, the unnerving calm of a man who had won the battle long before the formal proceedings began. Judge Carmen Rodriguez, known for her strict adherence to contract law, began the session. She looked directly at Isabel. "Mrs. Harper, please state your position regarding the terms of the prenuptial agreement." Isabel began, her voice carefully modulated to convey fragile remorse. "Your Honor, I admit I made a mistake, a terrible error in judgment. But I still love my husband. I wasn't thinking clearly. I deserve a chance to." She stopped, glancing at Ricardo, seeking any flicker of the compassion she desperately needed. She found none. He sat composed, reviewing documents, his focus unwavering. Ricardo's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, we submit the evidence. The defense concedes a mistake was made. We submit that the mistake was, in fact, documentable infidelity, which is precisely the term stipulated in the governing contract." He presented Ramon Stone's black binder. Inside were the indisputable facts, the time-stamped photos of Isabel and Julio entering hotels on South Beach, the geolocation records, the credit card statements showing joint funds spent on the affair. Every piece of evidence was pristine, chronological, and damning. Isabel tried to interrupt, raising her voice. Objection, Your Honor. These are highly selective moments taken out of context. My intent. Ricardo's lawyer calmly cut her off. Objection overruled, Your Honor. The contract requires only documented evidence of infidelity, not an analysis of intent. These are factual records. No further explanation is needed. The courtroom fell silent. Even Isabel's own lawyer looked defeated, his eyes fixed on the pile of irrefutable proof. Judge Rodriguez picked up the prenuptial agreement, finding the specific clause. Any form of infidelity shall forfeit the violator's right to marital assets, alimony, or compensation. She then methodically reviewed the evidence. Every violation was meticulously documented. Isabel whispered, tears finally streaming down her face. No longer performance, but genuine terror. Your Honor, please. I didn't realize the consequences. I can fix this. I just want my life back. Ricardo never looked up. He never spoke. His silent, controlled presence was the most crushing indictment of all. He was untouchable, protected by the very document she had dismissed as irrelevant. The gavel finally struck. Based on the evidence presented and the clear, unambiguous terms of the signed prenuptial agreement, Judge Rodriguez announced, her voice firm, Mrs. Harper forfeits all claims to marital assets, alimony, or compensation. The divorce is granted immediately on the grounds of documented marital abandonment and infidelity. Case dismissed. Isabel gasped, her carefully constructed world shattering around her. Her dramatic performance had dissolved into the stark reality of law and consequence. Ricardo stood. He collected his papers, straightened his tie, and, without a backward glance toward the weeping woman in the courtroom, walked out. He was victorious, not through anger, but through patience, strategy, and legal precision. The courtroom doors closed behind him. The air outside felt different, lighter, cleaner. 3 years of emotional debt and betrayal had been settled in a single, calm moment. The evidence, the prenup, the silence, it had all paid off. The moral conclusion. That evening, Ricardo returned to the condo, which was now entirely his. It was quiet, peaceful, a sanctuary reclaimed. He moved Isabel's few remaining personal items into a box for the storage unit. He cooked a simple meal, poured a glass of wine, and sat on his balcony, looking out at the city lights. He felt not gloating satisfaction, but unburdened freedom. The break Isabel wanted had become a permanent gift of self-respect. Meanwhile, Isabel was blocked on every channel. Her phone calls ignored, her attempts at communication legally rebuffed. Her thrill partner, Julio, had completely vanished. Her friends remained silent. She was utterly alone, adrift in the city she thought she owned. The 2 weeks of fleeting excitement had cost her home, her stability, and her financial future. She had gambled loyalty for excitement, commitment for fleeting pleasure, and control for reckless abandon. Ricardo had simply maintained his boundaries and respected the contract. In the quiet moments of her empty hotel room, Isabel finally understood the depth of her mistake. Ricardo hadn't fought her with emotion. He had defeated her with strategy. His strategy was simple. Give her exactly what she asked for, but on his legal terms. He was moving forward, taking solo diving trips to the Keys, excelling at his promoted job, and casually dating again with renewed clarity and self-respect. Isabel was left with a permanent, irreversible break, a harsh lesson that accountability is the true currency of commitment, and that some doors, once slammed shut by a calculated exit, can never be reopened.